It began on a quiet evening in London, the kind where the fog rolled in so slowly it looked almost alive, curling between gas lamps and slipping across the cobblestones like a cat that owned the whole city. People always imagine Victorian London as dark, cold, or strict, but on that particular night, everything felt strangely soft, as if the usual harsh edges of the world had been folded away. The air smelled faintly of coal and lavender soap. Carriages rattled slowly past, and behind half-drawn curtains, countless women were preparing to end their day with the same little ritual they had trusted for years. 3 teaspoons of a certain medicine, stirred into a glass of warm water, promised by every doctor to calm the nerves and help them sleep. No one knew yet that this miracle of the age would one day be exposed as the drug that quietly pushed thousands of Victorian women to the edge of madness. People back then didn't call it madness, of course. Everything had different names. A shaking hand was called weakness of the nerves. A burst of sudden laughter was hysteria. A sleepless night meant female troubles. And doctors, usually serious-looking men with starch collars, believed they had discovered a cure for nearly every one of these so-called conditions. It came in a small brown bottle, sold at every apothecary, carried in every doctor's satchel, and recommended to women the same way people today recommend herbal teas or calming music. Parents even kept it in kitchen drawers beside flour and sugar. The bottle didn't look dangerous. Most things that change history never do. The story of how this drug found its way into Victorian homes begins with one woman, someone who lived an ordinary life and never imagined she would become a warning whispered across the years. Her name was Clara Harwood, a gentle, thoughtful woman who had married young and moved into a neat little row house on Baker Street. Not the famous part, just the ordinary end where laundresses hung clothes outside and where neighbors quietly greeted each other at the start of each day. Clara wasn't wealthy, but she wasn't poor either. She spent her days sewing, drinking tea with friends, humming along to songs she only half remembered, and helping her husband with small accounting tasks when he brought his work home. She was the kind of person you'd pass on the street without noticing, the kind of woman history usually forgets. But history remembers her now because of what happened next. Clara had always worked hard to keep her life steady, but there was one thing she couldn't control: her nerves. That's what they called it when she felt too tired, too anxious, too overwhelmed, too human. Victorian society expected women to be perfect and calm, always ready to smile politely even when they felt their hearts racing inside their chests. When Clara finally visited the family doctor and quietly admitted that her hands trembled at night and her thoughts wouldn't settle, he didn't look alarmed at all. In fact, he smiled, patted her shoulder, and said he prescribed this tonic to nearly all the ladies in town. It was nothing unusual, nothing dangerous, nothing to worry about. He handed her the small brown bottle with the same confidence someone today might hand out vitamins. On the label, in faded gold lettering, were the words laudanum, for restlessness, sleeplessness, and nervous disturbances. It was a common mixture in those days, tincture of opium blended with alcohol and a few aromatic herbs. Doctors promised it would soothe the mind, relax the body, and restore balance to even the most troubled hearts. In a world without modern medicine, it was considered a gift, almost a blessing. Clara didn't question it. She trusted her doctor. Everyone did. The Victorian era respected authority the way children respect their parents, believing completely that those who wore white coats or carried medical bags were incapable of causing harm. So Clara took the bottle home, set it neatly on her nightstand, and that evening, after a long day of housework and worry, she carefully poured 3 teaspoons into her water the way the instructions suggested. It tasted bitter at first, but then strangely sweet, like something she couldn't quite describe but didn't dislike. Within an hour, she felt lighter, as though her bones had been quietly replaced with warm sunlight. Her mind stopped racing, her breath slowed, and for the first time in weeks, she slept deeply, peacefully without dreams. When she woke the next morning, she felt better than she had in years. It seemed like magic. She thought the bottle might actually have saved her. She had no idea how quickly her life was about to change. Over the next few weeks, Clara used the tonic whenever she felt her nerves returning, and the relief came every time. She no longer needed hours to fall asleep. She didn't feel sharp jolts of panic when the kettle whistled too loudly or when a carriage passed too close to the house. She laughed more with her friends. She walked with lighter steps. Everything felt easier, happier, almost effortless. But each time she drank it, she needed just a little bit more to feel the same calm. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable, like adding a pinch more sugar to tea because the flavor isn't quite right. 3 teaspoons became 4. 4 became 5. And soon the bottle emptied faster than expected. Clara found herself visiting the apothecary twice a week instead of once a month. The shopkeeper didn't question her. Women bought these bottles all the time. In fact, many bought even more than she did. London society whispered quietly that the tonic was a woman's best friend. They said it helped with sleepless nights, menstrual discomfort, melancholia, and even grief. They said it restored dignity, composure, and calm. Husbands bought it for wives. Mothers bought it for daughters. No one imagined it could ever be dangerous, because danger was something Victorian people believed they could always see, like a thief lurking in an alley or a runaway carriage on the street. They didn't believe danger could hide inside something so small and ordinary. But danger rarely announces itself. Little by little, Clara's world began to shift. Her thoughts became foggier. Her temper, normally soft and slow, began to spark without warning. She started forgetting conversations or losing track of tasks she had done for years. Some mornings she moved through the house as if it belonged to someone else. Her husband noticed she was growing distant, but he assumed she was simply tired. Everyone was tired in that era, tired from long days, tired from strict expectations, tired from pretending everything was fine. One evening, while Clara was sewing by the window, she felt a sudden rush of fear for no reason at all. Her heart pounded in her chest like it was trying to escape. The walls of the house felt too close, too tight, too heavy. She stood up so quickly her chair fell backward, but she didn't even notice. All she knew was that her mind wouldn't stop spinning, and the only thing she could think to do was reach for the bottle. This time, she didn't carefully measure teaspoons. She took a long swallow straight from the glass, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. And when the warm, familiar calm finally washed over her again, she exhaled in relief, so deep it almost sounded like a sob. That moment, quiet, lonely, desperate, was the beginning of the change. Not just for Clara, but for thousands of Victorian women who were slipping into the same hidden struggle. Doctors called it dependency years later. Historians now describe it as one of the most widespread and unseen drug epidemics of the century. But at the time, no one had the words for it. Women didn't talk about their fears. Husbands didn't recognize the signs. And society expected everyone to keep their troubles tucked neatly beneath polished appearances. As months passed, Clara's behavior became unpredictable. Some days she was her old self, gentle, warm, thoughtful. Other days she was irritable, restless, unable to sit still or finish a task. She began sleeping past noon or waking at odd hours of the night, pacing the hallway while whispering things even she didn't understand. Friends noticed the change, but they blamed stress or exhaustion. Her husband grew worried but didn't know what to ask or how to help. And Clara herself couldn't explain what was happening inside her own mind. She only knew one thing. Every time she reached for the bottle, the world softened again. And every time it wore off, the world collapsed. There were moments, fleeting but real, when Clara caught glimpses of what she was becoming. She once found herself crying in the kitchen without knowing why. Another time she realized she had taken the tonic twice in 1 hour, completely forgetting the first dose. And once, she knocked over a lamp while stumbling across the room and stared at the flickering flame on the carpet for a full minute before remembering she should put it out. It wasn't madness, not in the sensational way people describe it today. It was quiet confusion, disorientation, a growing sense that something inside her was slipping out of place. But the most frightening part was that she felt unable to stop it. She wasn't alone either. Across London, Similar stories unfolded behind closed doors. Women becoming dependent on the same harmless medicine, each believing they were struggling alone. No one imagined they were part of something much larger, a silent epidemic hidden beneath lace curtains and polite society. The real turning point came on a rain-soaked afternoon when Clara left the house without her shawl, wandering down the street as if she were sleepwalking. She didn't see the startled looks from neighbors or notice the mud soaking into her slippers. She just kept walking, her mind drifting between memories and shadows, until she suddenly realized she had no idea where she was. That was the moment everything changed because someone had been watching her, someone who knew exactly what the brown bottle did to the women who trusted it. Someone who had been waiting for a sign like this. A figure stepped out from the edge of the fog, calling Clara's name, but she couldn't recognize the voice. It sounded familiar, yet distant, like something half forgotten from a dream. She blinked, trying to focus, trying to understand. But the world around her was already tilting again, slow and heavy, the way it always did right before the calm faded and the panic returned. She took a shaky step backward, unsure if she was in danger or imagining things. The person reached out a hand and in a steady voice said, "Clara, listen carefully. You're not the only one. And you're not imagining any of this." Those words, simple but unsettling, made the air feel cold in her lungs. She stared at the hand, unsure whether to trust it, unsure whether she could trust herself. A storm rumbled in the distance. The fog thickened, and Clara realized she was suddenly standing at the edge of something far larger than her own struggle. Something that would force her to confront truths Victorian society had spent years hiding. She had no idea then that this moment, the moment someone finally said the truth out loud, would change everything. Not just for her, but for the countless women caught in the same quiet nightmare. And as she hesitated in the growing darkness, unsure whether to run or reach out, the story that history tried so hard to forget was only just beginning. If only she knew what was waiting for her in the next step. Clara stood completely still, her breath caught somewhere between fear and confusion. She stared at the figure in front of her, trying to focus through the fog that clung to her thoughts like damp wool. The street behind her was empty, the kind of emptiness that made every sound echo a little too loudly. The drizzle had turned into a steady rain, soaking through her dress, but she didn't feel the cold. She only felt the strange pull of that outstretched hand. The figure stepped closer, and slowly the blurry edges sharpened just enough for her to recognize the face beneath the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. It was Mrs. Alderton, the midwife who lived 2 streets away, a woman known for her calm voice and steady hands. She had delivered half the neighborhood's children and was trusted by almost everyone, even people who normally turn their noses up at women working in medicine. Mrs. Alderton wasn't wealthy, but she had the kind of reputation that made people listen. "Come with me, Clara," she said gently. "You shouldn't be out here alone." Clara wanted to answer, to explain something. She wasn't sure what, but her words tangled the moment they reached her mouth. Her mind spun like a window left open in a storm. She couldn't make sense of her thoughts, couldn't remember what she was doing before she wandered into the street. All she knew was the growing heaviness behind her eyes, the familiar signal that the effects of the tonic were fading, leaving behind that cold, shaky emptiness she feared more than anything. Mrs. Alderton seemed to understand. Without waiting for permission, she took Clara's arm and guided her toward her home, a small brick house with warm lamplight glowing through the curtains. Clara didn't resist. She didn't have the strength to. Her legs felt weak, her balance uncertain, and her heart beat too fast, as if trying to keep up with something she couldn't see. Inside the house, the warmth hit her all at once. A kettle hissed on the stove. The air smelled faintly of chamomile, and something herbal Clara couldn't name. Mrs. Alderton helped her into a chair by the fire and wrapped a wool blanket around her shoulders. The sudden comfort made Clara's eyes sting with tears she didn't understand. "You've been using the tonic often, haven't you?" Mrs. Alderton asked softly, pulling up a chair across from her. Clara swallowed hard. Her throat felt dry, her words stuck somewhere deep inside. She nodded slowly, ashamed for reasons she couldn't explain. How long? Clara stared at the fire, watching the flames blur and sharpen as her vision shifted. Months, she whispered. Maybe longer. I don't know anymore. Mrs. Alderton didn't look surprised. If anything, she looked relieved to finally hear it said out loud. You're not alone, she said. You're not the first woman I've found wandering like this. And you won't be the last. The words felt impossible. Clara lifted her head, her foggy mind trying to understand. But the doctor said it was safe. He said it helps everyone. Mrs. Alderton let out a long, tired breath, the kind of sigh that carried years of worry. Doctors say many things. Not all of them are right. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. The tonic calms you, yes. It soothes you, but it also takes hold of you. It makes your body depend on it. And the more you rely on it, the harder it becomes to live without it. Clara shook her head slowly. But if it's dangerous, why give it to so many women? Mrs. Alderton's eyes softened. Because they don't see us, Clara. Not truly. They think women are fragile creatures who can't cope with the world. They think a little bottle can fix everything. And they don't question what happens when that bottle empties. Clara pressed her hands to her temples, trying to push away the ache building behind her eyes. She didn't want to believe it. She didn't want to think the very thing that helped her sleep, helped her breathe, helped her feel normal again, was the same thing unraveling her thoughts. But deep inside, beneath the fear and confusion, something in her recognized the truth. She had felt the shift. She had noticed the changes. She had just been too afraid to name them. Mrs. Alderton rose and poured her a cup of warm chamomile tea, setting it gently on the table beside her. You need to rest, she said. Your body is fighting two battles at once, exhaustion and withdrawal. The word landed like a stone. Withdrawal, Clara repeated, her voice barely a whisper. Yes, Mrs. Alderton said softly. It's what happens when the tonic wears off and your body cries for more. Clara's fingers tightened around the blanket. She could feel her breath growing uneven, her chest tightening with fear. I didn't know, she said. I didn't know it could do this. That's why I brought you here, Mrs. Alderton said. Because you need to hear the truth. And because many women don't survive long enough to understand what's happening to them. Clara looked up sharply, startled by the seriousness in her voice. What do you mean? Mrs. Alderton hesitated, then spoke in a lower, steadier tone. You've heard the stories. Women losing their minds. Women fainting in the streets. Women waking in the night screaming, and no one knows why. Society blames weakness, or hysteria, or heartbreak. But I've seen the pattern. I've seen the bottles. And I've seen what happens when women take more than their bodies can bear. Clara's hands trembled again, the same trembling she used to think was just nerves. Why hasn't anyone spoken about it? They have, Mrs. Alderton said. But no one listens. Not to women. Not about something they believe is harmless. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the crackling of the fire and the faint whistle of the kettle cooling on the stove. Clara felt the weight of the words sinking into her chest like stones. A quiet dread grew inside her, something deeper than fear, something like recognition. She tried to steady her breath, but the more she tried, the more her body trembled. The familiar panic began creeping back in, tightening her throat, clouding her thoughts. She knew this feeling. It was always the same. It meant the calm was fading. It meant the craving was returning. She closed her eyes, trying to will it away, but the heaviness pressed harder. Mrs. Alderton watched her closely. It's starting again, isn't it? Clara nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks without warning. I don't want it, she whispered. But I can't. The words choked in her throat. I can't stop it. Mrs. Alderton reached out and gently took her hand, her voice steady and firm. You can, but not alone. Clara opened her eyes slowly, searching the older woman's face for something solid, something real to hold on to. Why are you helping me? Because someone helped me, she said quietly. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Clara stared at her, stunned. She had never imagined Mrs. Alderton, the reliable, calm, centered midwife, had ever struggled with anything remotely like this. It didn't seem possible. Clara whispered. Mrs. Alderton nodded. Years ago, before I became a midwife, before I understood what the tonic really was. She paused, her eyes reflecting memories she rarely revisited. I nearly lost myself to it, but someone pulled me out, and now I do the same when I can. Clara let out a shaky breath, a strange mixture of relief and dread washing through her. She wasn't alone. She wasn't weak. She wasn't imagining everything. But she was still standing on the edge of something she didn't understand, something dark and vast. Clara, Mrs. Alderton said softly, there's something you must know. You're not the only one who's fallen into this. There are dozens of women in this neighborhood, maybe more across the city. And someone with influence doesn't want the truth to come out. Clara felt her heart stutter. What are you talking about? Mrs. Alderton leaned closer, dropping her voice to almost a whisper. There are people profiting from this. People who depend on women staying silent. People who will go to great lengths to keep the tonic flowing and the truth buried. A cold shiver ran down Clara's spine. But we don't have to be silent, Mrs. Alderton said. Not anymore. If you're willing, I can show you what I've discovered. Clara swallowed hard, her pulse thudding in her ears. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to say no. She wanted everything to make sense again. But before she could answer, a sharp knock echoed through the house. Both women froze. Mrs. Alderton's expression changed instantly. Confusion first, then fear. Real fear. Clara watched her rise slowly, her footsteps soft on the wooden floor. The knocking came again, louder this time. Someone was at the door. Someone who shouldn't be there. And Clara realized, too late, that whatever Mrs. Alderton had been about to reveal was something someone didn't want either of them to hear. The knocking echoed again, louder and sharper, as if whoever stood on the other side of the door had grown impatient. Clara felt every muscle in her body tighten, her breath catching halfway in her throat. She didn't know who would come calling at this hour, especially in the kind of rain that blurred every street into a wash of gray. Mrs. Alderton moved carefully, her face calm, but her eyes alert, the way someone looks when they've been expecting trouble but hoping it wouldn't arrive. Clara wanted to rise, to hide, to do anything other than sit frozen in the chair, but her legs felt unsteady, weighed down by exhaustion and the lingering ache of the tonic wearing off. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears, and the world tilted slightly every time she blinked. She watched Mrs. Alderton step toward the door, her hand hovering near the knob as she listened for any hint of who might be waiting outside. Another knock came, 3 rapid beats that felt different somehow, almost coded, as though the person wanted to send a message rather than gain entry. Mrs. Alderton drew in a steady breath and opened the door just a few inches. Rain swept in on a gust of cold air, and for a moment Clara could only make out a dark silhouette standing on the porch. Then the figure leaned forward, and the lamplight illuminated his face. It was Dr. Harland. Clara's breath hitched. Her heart dipped sharply. She didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. The doctor who had prescribed her the tonic stood there, his coat dripping, his hat pulled low, his expression unreadable. He looked different somehow, less polished than he usually appeared, more tense, as if he hadn't expected to find Mrs. Alderton answering the door. "Good evening," he said, his voice low and clipped. "I'm looking for Clara Whitford. I was told she might have come this way." Mrs. Alderton didn't open the door any wider. "Clara is safe here," she replied evenly. "Why are you searching for her at this hour?" Dr. Harland's eyes flicked past her, scanning the room behind her, searching. Clara shrank into the shadows of the chair instinctively, unsure whether she wanted to be seen or not. She had trusted him completely once. She had believed every word he said, every instruction he gave. And yet now, in the warm light of Mrs. Alderton's home, something about him felt wrong. Too sharp, too insistent, as if he were looking for a patient, not a person. "I'm concerned for her health," Dr. Harland said. "Her sister came to my office today distressed. She said Clara had an episode. She feared she might harm herself wandering alone." The implication struck Clara like a blow. She opened her mouth to protest, to insist she had never meant to harm herself, but her voice refused to rise. Mrs. Alderton stiffened, clearly hearing the manipulation layered beneath his polished tone. "She is under my care now," Mrs. Alderton said firmly. "She doesn't need to be moved or examined tonight." Dr. Harlan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I respect your work, but you're not a physician. Clara needs proper supervision." Mrs. Alderton's hand tightened on the edge of the door. "She needs rest and honesty." A tense silence stretched between them. The rain whispered against the roof, dripping from the edge of the porch. The fire crackled softly behind Clara, but she barely felt its warmth anymore. Dr. Harlan leaned in slightly. "I must insist. If the tonic has caused her distress, I need to assess her condition myself." His voice lowered. "It's my responsibility." Something in the way he said that last word made Clara's pulse spike. It didn't sound like concern. It sounded like possession. Before Mrs. Alderton could answer, Clara forced herself to stand. Her knees shook, and the room shifted unevenly, but she clung to the arm of the chair for support. "I'm here," she said, her voice trembling but loud enough to carry across the small room. Both of them turned toward her. Dr. Harlan's expression softened instantly, almost rehearsed. "Clara," he said warmly, stepping forward as if to greet her. She flinched back instinctively. Mrs. Alderton moved subtly to block his path. "I'm all right," Clara said, though she wasn't sure she believed that yet. "I just needed somewhere quiet." "You should have come to me," Dr. Harlan said. "I could have helped." Clara hesitated. The words that once comforted her now felt hollow. "I don't know what's happening to me," she admitted, her voice cracking. "I don't understand why I feel this way." "You're overwhelmed," he replied gently. "It's normal. Life is difficult, especially for women. That's why the tonic exists, to ease the burden. You simply require the correct dosage again." A chill ran down Clara's spine. He spoke of the tonic the way someone might speak of water or bread or air, as if it were essential, as if she would fall apart without it. Mrs. Alderton stepped closer to Clara, offering silent support. "She doesn't need more tonic," she said. "She needs to be free of it." Dr. Harlan's jaw tightened. "You're mistaken." Clara felt caught between them, their voices pulling her in different directions. Her mind throbbed with confusion, her thoughts flickering like candle flames in a draft. She wanted clarity, but the more they spoke, the more tangled everything became. "Clara," Dr. Harlan said softly, "look at me." She forced herself to meet his eyes. They were steady, confident, familiar, comforting in a way that made her uneasy. "You know I care about your well-being," he continued. "You've trusted me all this time. I haven't led you astray." Clara swallowed hard. He wasn't wrong. She had trusted him. But trust wasn't the same as truth. "Doctor," she whispered, "why didn't you tell me the tonic could do this?" His eyes flickered for the briefest moment. Something like annoyance or calculation, she couldn't tell. "The tonic is safe," he said carefully, "when used properly." "But women are getting worse," Clara whispered. "Not better." "That is not the tonic's fault," he replied, his calmness forced. "That is simply the nature of certain conditions." Mrs. Alderton let out a quiet, disbelieving breath. "You've seen it, Harlan. You know what it's doing. Stop pretending." He turned his gaze to her, cold and firm. "You're spreading fear. You're meddling in things outside your profession. That is dangerous for you and the women you influence." Clara felt the shift in his tone. The warmth was gone now, replaced with something sharper. "Doctor," Clara said, her voice uneven, "why are you here?" "Really here?" His silence stretched too long. The rain outside softened, becoming a low, steady hush. Finally he spoke. "Because if you stop taking the tonic abruptly," he said, "your condition will worsen. And if it worsens too quickly, there may be consequences." He met her eyes steadily. Severe consequences. Clara's breath caught. She didn't know whether to believe him. Mrs. Alderton shook her head. "He's trying to frighten you. You can recover, Clara. It's difficult, but it can be done." Dr. Harlan's eyes narrowed slightly. Withdrawal is not something she can face alone in a small house with no medical equipment. Mrs. Alderton didn't look away. She won't be alone, and she doesn't need equipment. She needs care. Clara didn't know what to say. Her mind felt like a fragile thread pulled too tight. Her hands trembled, her breath uneven. "Clara," Dr. Harlan said softly, "if you come with me now, I can help you through the night. I can ensure you don't suffer more than necessary." Clara stared at him, searching his face for reassurance, searching for the doctor she once believed in. But something in his expression felt off, too polished, too controlled, as if he were performing something, not revealing anything. She turned to Mrs. Alderton. The older woman's eyes were steady, unwavering, calm despite the tension thickening the air. There was truth in her gaze, honesty, something solid that Clara could hold on to in the fog. Clara took one slow breath, then another, and finally, she shook her head. "No," she said quietly. "I'm staying here." Dr. Harlan's expression froze, just for a moment, but it was enough to reveal something underneath the surface, something colder than concern. "As you wish," he said, stepping back into the rain. "But I hope you understand the risk you're taking." He tipped his hat, turned, and walked away. The door closed softly, but the dread he left behind settled heavily in the room, as real as the storm outside. Mrs. Alderton exhaled slowly. "He won't give up now," she murmured. "This is only the beginning." Clara shivered, not from cold, but from something darker. "Why does it feel like he's hiding something?" she whispered. Mrs. Alderton looked toward the door, her expression somber. "Because," she said gently, "he is." And Clara realized, with a slow, sinking certainty, that tonight's fear was only the surface of something much deeper and far more dangerous. The truth was that no one in London fully understood how all these strange events were connected. People whispered about the Victorian medicine craze, but most of them didn't really know what that meant. They only knew that for years pharmacists had promised miracles in small glass bottles. Drops for nerves, powders for sleeplessness, syrups for sadness, tonics for exhaustion. Every shelf was lined with something that claimed to restore calm or brighten the mood. And in a city where stress clung to every street like fog, people wanted to believe in anything that felt like relief. Clara had grown up watching women walk into shops with trembling hands, asking quietly for something to help with the nerves. It wasn't shame, just habit. Everyone pretended life was easier than it was. The long hours, the uncertain money, the cold winters, the endless social expectations. It all pressed down on people until even simple joys felt heavy. Clara knew this because she felt it too, but she had never expected that one tiny bottle could turn that heaviness into something dangerous. It had started with Miss Dawson's outburst that day in the market, but since then Clara had noticed other odd moments around the city. A woman shouting at a group of boys for laughing too loudly. Another woman crying uncontrollably in the middle of a bakery. Someone else speaking so fast and with such intensity that she seemed almost breathless. None of these moments had been violent, but all of them had carried the same uncomfortable energy, like people were being pulled by something stronger than themselves. Henry noticed it too. He had always been practical and calm, the type of person who balanced Clara when she worried too much. Lately, though, even he seemed troubled. "I don't like what I'm seeing," he told her as they walked home one cloudy afternoon. "It's not just nerves. It's almost like their emotions have no brakes." Clara nodded quietly. She wasn't sure what scared her more, the behavior itself, or the idea that something in those bottles might be causing it. People trusted pharmacists. They trusted the labels, the instructions, the promises of gentle relief. No one wanted to imagine those promises could be wrong. One evening, when the fog was so thick it blurred the street lamps, Clara sat at her small desk and tried to write down everything she'd seen. She didn't know why, maybe to make sense of it, maybe because writing gave her a way to breathe. She listed Miss Dawson's sudden rage, the bakery woman's collapse, the story she'd overheard from customers at the shop. As she wrote, she realized something uncomfortable. Many of these women had one thing in common. They all mentioned trying a new soothing tonic. Some called it a nerve tonic, others a calming draft, others simply the drops. But it was always described the same way: warm, comforting, almost too good. Clara's pen paused. Was that really a coincidence? Just as she started to consider the idea more seriously, Henry came home with a puzzled expression. He held a folded newspaper in his hand, the kind that reporters sold on the streets with dramatic shouts of breaking news. "You need to read this," he said quietly. Clara took the paper and scanned the front page. At first, nothing caught her eye, just the usual stories about politics, factories, and the weather. But then she saw a small column on the right side, almost hidden among the larger headlines. The title was simple, but it sent a ripple through her. Unusual episodes among women reported across the city. Possible link to popular tonic. Her breath caught. The article described several incidents. Strange episodes of heightened emotion, sudden bursts of energy, or overwhelming sadness. One woman had spent 2 days awake without resting. Another had spoken so quickly that her own family couldn't understand her. Another had become so anxious she refused to leave her home at all. Clara felt her heart beat faster. The article mentioned no brand names, but it did refer to a new mixture sold by independent pharmacists. She looked at Henry. "Do you think?" He sighed. "I'm not sure, but too many people are whispering about the same thing." In the following days, Clara began paying closer attention at the shop. She didn't ask direct questions, it wasn't her place, but she listened carefully. And she noticed that customers who bought the calming tonic always returned sooner than expected. Some said it helped them feel lighter. Others admitted, almost shyly, that they felt more alive after taking it. But their eyes told another story. They sparkled with something that looked like excitement mixed with exhaustion, a kind of energy that didn't seem natural. The more Clara watched, the more uneasy she felt. Her unease turned into real fear 1 week later. It was a quiet afternoon, rain tapping lightly against the shop windows. A woman came in, Mrs. Hawthorne, one of their regular customers. She was usually gentle and soft-spoken, but today she walked in quickly, almost too quickly, her breathing fast. Her hands were trembling. "I need more of the tonic," she said immediately, not even bothering with the greeting. Clara glanced at Henry. He seemed startled too. "You just bought a bottle 2 days ago," he said gently. "Are you feeling unwell?" Mrs. Hawthorne hesitated, her eyes darting around the shop. Then she leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I feel wonderful," she said with a strange smile. "I haven't slept much, but I don't need to. My heart feels like it's racing, and everything seems clearer than ever. I can hear things I never noticed before. I can't explain it, but I don't want it to stop." Clara felt a coldness slide through her chest. She had never heard Mrs. Hawthorne speak like that. The excitement in her voice was unnerving, almost frantic. Henry cleared his throat. "Perhaps you should rest a little before taking more. Sometimes too much of any medicine." "No," Mrs. Hawthorne interrupted sharply. "I need it now." The shop fell silent. Even the rain seemed to pause. Clara slowly handed her a new bottle, though every part of her wanted to pull it back. Mrs. Hawthorne snatched it quickly, tucked it into her bag, and hurried out without another word. As soon as the door closed, Henry locked it, something he almost never did during business hours. "That's it," he whispered. "Something is wrong. Really wrong." Clara nodded, her hands shaking. They both stood in silence for a long moment, listening to the rain and the distant sound of carriage wheels rolling over wet cobblestones. Neither of them wanted to say the thought they were both having, that this tonic wasn't just soothing anyone. It was altering them. And the more they thought about it, the more they realized they had no idea who made it, how it was mixed, or why it was suddenly everywhere. No labels, no warnings, no consistent ingredients. Just trust and hope and desperate people looking for relief. That night, Clara barely slept. She kept replaying Mrs. Hawthorne's frantic smile, the shining eyes, the strange excitement. She felt like London itself had shifted, like something dangerous was spreading quietly from home to home, bottle by bottle. By morning, the fog felt heavier than usual. Clara dressed slowly, thinking about the newspaper article, the whispers from customers, the sudden change in so many women. She wanted answers, but she wasn't sure where to find them. When she reached the shop, Henry was already there, standing in the dim light with a bottle of the tonic in his hand. "We need to find out what's inside this," he said quietly. Before Clara could respond, The front door rattled suddenly, as if someone had tried to open it with force. They both froze. The rattling came again, louder this time. Someone was outside. Someone desperate. And then a familiar voice called through the door, trembling with urgency. "Please open up. I need more." It was Mrs. Hawthorne, and something in her voice told Clara that whatever was happening, it was getting worse. The story would only grow darker from here. Clara didn't move at first. She just stared at the door as Mrs. Hawthorne's voice shook through the wood. It was the kind of voice that sounded both desperate and exhausted, like someone who had run out of choices and was running purely on instinct. Henry stepped toward the door, but even he paused halfway, unsure whether opening it would help or only make things worse. The rattling of the handle grew more frantic. "Please," Mrs. Hawthorne whispered, her breath catching. "I just need a little more. I can't calm down without it." Clara exchanged a worried glance with Henry. This wasn't the same woman who had walked in 2 days ago. This voice belonged to someone unraveling. Henry finally spoke, keeping his tone steady. "Mrs. Hawthorne, you need a rest. You shouldn't be taking more of the tonic right now." There was silence on the other side of the door, an eerie, breath-holding silence. Then came a soft thud, as if she had pressed her forehead against the wood. "I can't rest," she murmured. "My heart won't stop. My thoughts won't stop. I can hear everything. Every tiny noise. The ticking of my clock. The footsteps in the hallway. Even my own breathing sounds too loud. I just want to stop." Clara felt her heart twist painfully. This wasn't someone acting dramatic. This was someone suffering. She moved closer to the door. "Mrs. Hawthorne, please go home. I promise we'll come visit you later. You're not alone." But instead of answering, Mrs. Hawthorne suddenly swallowed a sharp breath, almost a gasp, and hurried footsteps echoed away down the street. Clara rushed to the window and saw her darting around the corner, her movements uneven and frantic, like she wasn't fully aware of where she was going. Henry locked the door again. "She's not the only one," he said quietly, his voice heavy. "I've heard talk at the market. Women fainting, women shouting, women staying awake for days. Something is spreading, Clara." Clara nodded, hugging her arms tightly across her chest. "And it's all coming from that bottle." Henry placed the tonic on the counter and stared at it, as if hoping it would explain itself. The liquid inside was clear, almost too clear. No scent, no color, nothing that gave away what made it so powerful. "We need to find out who's selling it," Henry said, "and where they're getting it." Clara swallowed. "But how? It's sold everywhere. Half the small shops in London have it now." "Not every one," Henry replied. "There's one apothecary on High Street, Mr. Bellamy's. He refuses to sell it. Says he doesn't trust mixtures without proper labels." Clara blinked. "So he might know something?" Henry nodded. "Or he suspects something. Either way, he might help." The idea gave Clara a tiny spark of hope. Not enough to erase her fear, but enough to steady her breath. They decided to close the shop early that afternoon, hanging a small sign on the door that read, "Closed for family reasons." Neither of them felt great about shutting down early, but the situation felt too serious to ignore anymore. As they walked through the misty streets toward High Street, Clara kept noticing tiny signs that something in the city was shifting. A woman walking too fast, her face pale and eyes wide. Another muttering to herself as she clutched her coat tighter. A third standing completely still near a lamppost, staring up at the sky as if searching for answers no one else could see. The fog made everything feel eerie, as though London was holding its breath. Mr. Bellamy's apothecary was a small shop wedged between a bakery and a tailor's shop. The windows were lined with jars and dried herbs, and the inside smelled of lavender and old books. Mr. Bellamy himself was an older man with silver hair tied neatly at the back. He wore spectacles that seemed a little too large for his face, giving him a constantly surprised expression. He looked up from his counter when Clara and Henry entered. "Ah," he said softly, "you look troubled. Most people are these days." Henry didn't waste time. "We need to talk to you about the new calming tonic, the one everyone's buying." Mr. Bellamy's expression darkened instantly. He put down the small jar he was labeling and crossed his arms. "I won't sell that stuff," he said. "I've told the suppliers, I've told my customers, and I've told every apprentice who'll listen. It isn't normal. Clara stepped closer. What do you know about it? Mr. Bellamy leaned against the counter, his voice dropping slightly. I don't know who created it. It started appearing a few months ago at the trade fair near Whitechapel. People were excited because it worked faster than any herbal mixture. Too fast, if you ask me. The moment I saw how quickly it calmed people, I knew it wasn't natural. Henry frowned. Do you know what's in it? Mr. Bellamy shook his head. The samples brought to me were completely unlabeled. Perfectly clear. No smell. Nothing recognizable. When I asked the distributors about ingredients, they avoided the question. They said it was a modern formula imported from abroad. Clara felt a chill. But couldn't it just be a new kind of remedy? Mr. Bellamy's voice hardened. Remedies don't make people behave like that. He paused, then walked to a cabinet and unlocked it with a small brass key. Inside lay a single bottle, identical to the ones Clara had seen in the shop. I kept one for study, he said. I've been trying to identify its components, but every test I've run comes back inconclusive. It behaves like water, but it isn't water. Clara stared at the bottle, feeling a quiet dread settle over her. Something about its simplicity felt wrong. Mr. Bellamy continued, and that's not the worst part. Clara's heartbeat quickened. What do you mean? He looked at both of them with a seriousness that made their stomachs tighten. I've had 3 customers come to me recently, asking for help after taking that tonic. All women, all describing the same symptoms: sharp bursts of emotion, sleeplessness, racing thoughts, agitation. He paused. One of them told me something I haven't repeated to anyone. Clara leaned in. What did she say? Mr. Bellamy hesitated, then spoke slowly. She said she felt like something was pushing her thoughts. Not guiding them, pushing them. As if her own mind was moving too fast for her to control. Clara felt her breath catch. Henry whispered, that sounds like... Yes, Mr. Bellamy interrupted. Like mania. A heavy silence filled the shop. Clara felt as though the fog outside had crept in her chest, thick and suffocating. She hadn't wanted to say the word herself, but now that it was spoken aloud, she couldn't ignore it. Is there any way to stop it? She asked. Mr. Bellamy sighed. I've tried everything. Herbs, rest, water. None of it helps. The effects fade only when the tonic runs out and when the women don't take another dose. But they all keep coming back, Henry said quietly, desperate for more. Mr. Bellamy nodded, his face grim. That's what worries me most. He placed a bottle on the counter between them. Someone created this mixture, he said. Someone who knew exactly what it would do. Clara felt a chill run through her. But why? What would anyone gain from making something like this? Mr. Bellamy met her eyes. That, he said softly, is the question keeping me awake at night. Before Clara could ask anything else, the shop bell rang. A young woman stepped inside, her face flushed, her eyes restless, her breathing uneven, and in her shaking hands, she held an empty bottle. Please, she whispered, voice trembling. I need more. Clara knew her. It was Miss Dawson, and the look in her eyes told them all the same terrifying truth. This wasn't just spreading, it was accelerating, and they had no idea how much time was left before the entire city felt the effects. Miss Dawson's breathing filled the small apothecary, too fast, too sharp. She looked around the room as if she couldn't focus on one thing for more than a second. Her hands were trembling so badly that the empty bottle she carried tapped softly against her fingers. Clara had seen fear before, but this was something different. This was a person pulled in 2 directions at once, unable to slow down or think clearly. Mr. Bellamy moved toward her with calm, steady steps. Miss Dawson, he said gently, you shouldn't have any more of that mixture. It isn't safe. But she shook her head quickly, her hair falling out of place as she pressed her free hand to her chest. My heart won't slow down, she whispered. I can't sit still. I can't sleep. I can't think. Everything feels loud. Please, just a little more. I just need to feel normal again. Clara felt an ache in her chest. Miss Dawson was usually so cheerful, so full of warmth, the kind of person who greeted everyone on the street with a smile. Seeing her like this felt wrong, as if some invisible hand had taken hold of her mind and wouldn't let go. Henry stepped between her and the counter, speaking softly but firmly. You need rest, not more of that tonic. If you take it again, it might make everything worse. Miss Dawson's eyes widened, almost childlike with fear, and she looked from one face to another as if searching for someone who understood her panic. Then what do I do? She whispered. I can't go home like this. Mr. Bellamy motioned toward a wooden chair by the wall. Sit, he said gently. Just breathe for a moment. She obeyed, but even sitting down didn't calm her. Her fingers tapped against her knees. Her foot bounced. Her eyes shifted restlessly, never staying still. Clara knelt beside her and placed a hand lightly on her arm. Miss Dawson, she said softly, when did this start? After the tonic? Miss Dawson swallowed hard. The first time I took it, it felt like magic. Like all the weight I carried just lifted off. Her voice softened, almost dreamy for a moment. I felt free. She blinked fast, her expression tightening again. But then the feeling changed. Everything got sharper, brighter. I thought it was just excitement, but after a few days, I couldn't slow my mind down. I haven't slept properly in a week. Clara felt the word mania echo again in her mind. She pushed it away, not wanting to attach labels to someone in pain. But the signs were there, clear as the fog outside. Miss Dawson grabbed Clara's wrist suddenly, her grip strong. Do you know what's happening to me? She whispered. Am I losing my mind? Clara shook her head quickly. No, you're overwhelmed, and you're not the only one. We're going to figure this out. Mr. Bellamy looked at Henry, then at the bottle on the counter, then at Miss Dawson, who now seemed moments from breaking down. The weight of the situation pressed on all of them. Something was affecting people across London, and if a single small bottle could do this much damage, there was no telling how many others were struggling alone. A soft tapping at the shop window suddenly broke the tense silence. Clara turned. Outside, in the fog, she saw a man standing close to the glass. His coat was dark, his hat pulled low, and his expression, though partly hidden, carried a strange stillness. He didn't try to enter. He didn't speak. He just stood there, watching them. Henry went stiff. Do you know him? He whispered to Mr. Bellamy. Mr. Bellamy shook his head, frowning. Never seen him before. The man stayed there for a moment longer. Then he turned and disappeared into the fog. Clara felt the hair on her neck rise. What was that about? Mr. Bellamy exhaled slowly. I don't know, but ever since I refused to sell that tonic, I've felt eyes on me. Someone doesn't like the questions I'm asking. Henry folded his arms. Whoever made that mixture doesn't want people looking too closely. If this is spreading across the city, they must be distributing it fast. Clara looked around the shop, suddenly aware of how small and exposed it felt. Then we need to find out where it's coming from before things get worse. Miss Dawson let out a shaky breath. How will you find that? Mr. Bellamy walked to the back of the shop and returned with a ledger, a thick, worn book filled with supplier names and trade notes. Most of the distributors who handle new mixtures leave a paper trail, he explained. If I can find the name of the man who brought the first sample, we might have a place to start. Clara watched as he flipped through the pages, stopping at a line written in hurried script. He tapped the name with his finger. Elias Fairchild. Henry read it out loud. Doesn't ring a bell. Mr. Bellamy shook his head. He claimed to represent a new pharmaceutical company, but he had no business card, no address, no official documents. Just a box of samples. Clara frowned. Why did anyone trust him then? Because people want easy answers, Mr. Bellamy said bluntly. And London is tired. So when someone offers relief in a bottle, no one asks many questions. Clara understood that too well. Even she had wanted to believe the mixture was harmless at first. But now, watching Miss Dawson tremble in the corner, she couldn't ignore the truth. The tonic wasn't healing anyone. It was unraveling them. Just as Mr. Bellamy turned back to the ledger, the shop bell rang again. But this time, the person who walked in wasn't frantic or trembling. It was a tall man in a well-pressed coat, carrying a leather briefcase. His expression was pleasant, too pleasant. Good afternoon, he said with a polite smile. Apologies for the intrusion. I'm looking for Mr. Bellamy. Mr. Bellamy stiffened immediately. I'm afraid we're closed. The The man ignored the sign and stepped deeper into the shop. I won't take much of your time. I'm here on behalf of our company to discuss the distribution of our very successful calming tonic. Clara felt the air in the room shift. Henry stepped closer to her without thinking. Miss Dawson looked up from the chair, her eyes wide again, as if she recognized his voice or presence in some instinctive way. The man continued calmly. We've noticed you declined our product, Mr. Bellamy. And lately, we've been informed that you've been asking questions we prefer remain unanswered. Clara's stomach tightened. Mr. Bellamy didn't flinch. Your tonic is harming people. The man's smile didn't fade. If anything, it grew more controlled. Side effects are common in early formulations. There is no cause for alarm. Clara couldn't believe what she was hearing. People are suffering, she said softly. The man looked at her for a long moment, studying her with unsettling calm. All progress comes with discomfort, miss. Henry took a step forward. Progress? You call this progress? The man gently closed his briefcase. We call it advancement, a new age of medicine, and I suggest you stop interfering before you disrupt something you do not understand. Mr. Bellamy's voice hardened. We're not stopping. For the first time, the man's smile faded, replaced with something colder. Then I suggest you be careful, he said quietly. London is a large city, but news travels quickly, and we wouldn't want unnecessary trouble. He tipped his hat slightly, turned, and walked out as smoothly as he had entered. The door clicked shut. No one spoke. Clara felt her breath trembling. Miss Dawson was gripping her chair as if she feared the man might return. Henry looked like he wanted to run after him and demand answers, but Mr. Bellamy placed a firm hand on his arm. Not yet, he said softly. We need to be smart. Clara whispered, what do we do now? Mr. Bellamy closed the ledger. We find Elias Fairchild, he said, and we uncover whatever this company is hiding. Henry nodded slowly. Miss Dawson looked from face to face, her voice barely audible. Please, promise me you won't let this get worse. Clara squeezed her hand. We won't. But as she said the words, she felt a deep uncertainty settle inside her. Because London was already changing, and whatever they had just stepped into was far bigger than they had imagined. Clara couldn't shake the tension left behind by the stranger's visit. Even after he disappeared into the fog, his words lingered in the air like a warning. Miss Dawson sat quietly now, exhausted after her frantic episode. She wasn't trembling as much, but her eyes held that restless shine, like a candle flame that refused to steady. Henry checked the front door twice to make sure it was locked. Mr. Bellamy lowered the shop's lamps until only a faint golden glow lit the counters. The silence felt heavy, as if the city itself was listening. We need to move quickly, Mr. Bellamy finally said, breaking the stillness. If Elias Fairchild really is connected to this company, then he's our best chance to understand what's happening. Clara nodded, though she felt a knot of fear in her stomach. Where do we even start looking for him? Mr. Bellamy rubbed his forehead slowly, thinking. When he visited me, he mentioned he was staying near Whitechapel. Said he was calling on several apothecaries in the area. Henry frowned. Whitechapel is huge and crowded. He could be anywhere. Clara looked at the ledger again, drawn to the neat handwriting next to his name. Is that his real signature? She asked. Mr. Bellamy hesitated. I'm not certain, but if it is, someone in the city might know the name. A landlord, a porter at an inn, someone who handled his luggage. Men like him don't carry boxes of medicine on their own. They hire help. Henry nodded slowly, understanding. Then we should ask around. Carefully. Miss Dawson looked up, her voice fragile. Please, don't let him find out you're searching for him. That man who came in here, he didn't look like someone who forgives curiosity. Clara placed a comforting hand on Miss Dawson's shoulder. We won't take any risks, but we can't stand by either. Too many women are struggling. Miss Dawson's eyes softened with gratitude, though fear still hovered behind her expression. Mr. Bellamy exhaled deeply. For now, Miss Dawson, you need rest. You can stay in the back room until you feel steady enough to go home. Miss Dawson nodded weakly as Clara helped her toward the small room behind the counter. The moment she lay down on the narrow bed, exhaustion washed over her. She closed her eyes, but her breathing remained uneven, as if her mind still raced behind her eyelids. Clara watched her for a moment, feeling a mix of worry and responsibility. She didn't know Miss Dawson well, but she couldn't ignore the weight of what was happening. The city wasn't safe, not in the way people claimed. There were dangers quietly slipping into homes, wrapped in the comfort of tiny glass bottles. When Clara returned to the shop, Henry and Mr. Bellamy were speaking in low voices. "This can't stay quiet for long," Henry was saying. "If more women start showing signs like Miss Dawson, that's why we have to act before panic spreads," Mr. Bellamy replied. "Fear moves quickly through London, faster than fog." Henry glanced toward Clara and lowered his voice even further. But she had already heard enough to know the truth. They were now involved in something much larger than a faulty tonic. Something organized, something hidden. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows like a living thing. They waited until Miss Dawson fell asleep before deciding to leave the shop together. Mr. Bellamy didn't want to risk Clara or Henry walking alone. The three of them stepped into the cold night, staying close as they made their way down the narrow street. Gas lamps flickered above them, casting long shadows across the pavement. Clara couldn't shake the feeling that someone might be watching. At the corner, Henry stopped suddenly. "Did you hear that?" They all paused, listening. For a moment, there was nothing but the distant clatter of a horse-drawn carriage. Then a faint shuffling sound came from a nearby alley. It was small, quick, almost like someone stepping back into the shadows. Mr. Bellamy placed a hand on Henry's arm. "Keep walking. Don't look back." They did as he said, but Clara felt her pulse quicken. She didn't dare turn around, though she sensed eyes on them, following their movements through the fog. When they reached Clara's building, Henry insisted on walking her up to her door. Mr. Bellamy waited downstairs, glancing around the street with growing unease. Inside the hallway, Clara whispered, "Do you think that man sent someone after us?" Henry shook his head, though not confidently. "I don't know, but we're not alone in this anymore." Clara swallowed hard. "Be careful tonight." "You too," Henry said. "Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone you don't trust." Clara nodded, then stepped inside and secured the lock behind her. Her small room felt colder than usual. She lit a candle and sat by the window, watching the fog move like pale smoke through the street below. Sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant shout made her sit up, alert. She kept thinking about the stranger's calm voice, the way he spoke as if nothing mattered. Not the fear, not the harm, not the people caught in the middle of his company's ambition. "Progress comes with discomfort," he had said. Clara shivered. She blew out the candle only when dawn began to lighten the sky. The fog had thinned, but the streets still felt heavy with unease. Clara washed quickly and hurried downstairs, meeting Henry and Mr. Bellamy outside the shop. Miss Dawson was resting inside, still too weak to go home. Mr. Bellamy handed Henry a slip of paper. "This is the address of the lodging house Elias Fairchild mentioned when he first delivered the tonic. It might be nothing, but we must start somewhere." Henry tucked it safely into his coat. "We'll go together." Clara stepped forward. "I'm coming too." Mr. Bellamy hesitated. "It might be dangerous." Clara shook her head. "People need help, and I want to see how deep this goes." Henry didn't argue. He knew better than to try. The three of them walked east toward Whitechapel. The streets grew busier the nearer they got, filled with vendors shouting, children weaving through crowds, and women carrying baskets of laundry or vegetables. Everything looked normal from a distance, but as they passed faces in the crowd, Clara saw familiar signs. Wide eyes, fast breathing, slight tremors, a brightness that didn't feel healthy. Some of these women were taking the tonic too, and some looked like they were only at the beginning of its effects. Mr. Bellamy slowed as they approached a narrow street lined with old brick houses and leaning lamp posts. At the far end stood a wooden building with peeling paint and a faded sign, Cartwright's Lodging House. "This is it," he whispered. Clara felt the weight of the moment settle in her bones. As they stepped closer, an old woman sweeping the front steps of a neighboring house lifted her head and watched them. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but not with suspicion, more like worry. "Are you looking for someone?" she asked, her voice raspy from years of London soot. Henry stepped forward politely. "We're looking for a man called Elias Fairchild. We were told he stayed here." At the mention of the name, the woman's hands stopped mid-sweep. Her expression changed, not surprised but troubled. "Well," she said slowly, "if you're looking for him, I'm afraid you're a bit late." Clara's heart skipped. The woman leaned on her broom, voice lowering as if sharing something she shouldn't. "He left suddenly 3 nights ago, middle of the night. Didn't pack, didn't pay his room. Just vanished." "Did anyone see where he went?" Clara asked. The woman hesitated again, chewing her lip. Then she pointed to the back alley behind the lodging house. "He didn't go through the front door?" She looked at Clara, then Mr. Bellamy, then Henry, searching their faces as though deciding whether to continue. Finally, she whispered, "And he wasn't alone." Clara felt the chill return. The mystery was deepening, and somewhere behind those old brick walls, the truth waited, dark, complicated, and far more dangerous than they had expected. The night seemed heavier than usual as Clara hurried through the narrow lane, her breath forming soft clouds in the cold air. She kept glancing over her shoulder, even though she knew no one had followed her from the apothecary. Still, the feeling pressed on her, as if someone unseen walked just a few steps behind. Her notebook trembled in her hand, filled with the newest whispers that tied the Victorian women's tonic to the sudden bursts of strange behavior across London. She wasn't sure what scared her more, the stories themselves or how quickly they were spreading, like smoke slipping beneath doors. The mystery felt alive now, pulsing through every dark corner of the city, and Clara sensed she had crossed a line she couldn't reverse. Earlier that evening, she'd visited another family affected by the tonic. Mr. Rowan had greeted her with a tired, polite smile, but the fear behind his eyes was impossible to hide. His wife, a once soft-spoken woman who spent her days reading near the fireplace, now couldn't stand still. She paced from wall to wall, murmuring to herself, hands trembling as if she were trying to hold on to something that kept slipping through her fingers. She never became violent, but her sudden bursts of restlessness had left the household on edge. Clara listened carefully, her heart tightening with every detail. These women weren't dangerous. They were lost, chasing after thoughts they couldn't catch. This wasn't madness. It was something done to them. Now, walking home with her thoughts swirling, Clara felt a strong sense of urgency. Londoners were whispering more openly now. The newspapers danced around the subject, calling it temporary hysteria or emotional disarray. But the public sensed something stranger. Apothecaries refused to discuss their ingredients. Doctors exchanged guarded looks when asked direct questions. And anywhere Clara went, someone had a story to tell. A neighbor who suddenly couldn't sleep. A seamstress who spent hours tearing fabric apart before realizing she had done it. A maid who heard music no one else heard. These weren't isolated cases anymore. They were threads of a larger pattern. As she reached her building, she paused on the steps. The lamppost nearby flickered, casting long shadows across the stone. She felt the same chill she had felt in Dr. Merrick's office, that moment when he hesitated before naming the herb tied to the tonic. That hesitation wasn't innocence. It was fear. She now understood that he wasn't afraid of the patients. He was afraid of whoever controlled the supply of the drug. That alone told her she was walking into far deeper trouble. Upstairs, Clara lit a single oil lamp, its warm glow pushing back the darkness. She spread her notes on the table, tracing patterns with her fingers. Every detail she'd gathered pointed to something intentional. Someone was altering the recipe. Someone was distributing it quietly but steadily. Someone wanted London's women distracted, overwhelmed, confused. And the closer she looked, the stranger it became. Supplies seemed to vanish before authorities could examine them. Some sellers denied ever offering the tonic, even when customers insisted they had bought it only days earlier. It was as if someone were erasing the trail as soon as it appeared. Clara leaned back in her chair, rubbing her tired eyes. She reminded herself to breathe slowly, to keep the rising anxiety from clouding her judgment. This wasn't about superstition or fear. This was a pattern backed by real evidence, ingredients, testimonies, timelines. But the more she uncovered, the more the city itself seemed to resist her efforts. As if London wanted to keep its secrets buried beneath fog and cobblestone. A sudden knock at the door made her jump. She hesitated, heart racing. Visitors were rare at this hour, and no neighbor would stop by unannounced. The knock came again, gentler this time. Clara forced herself to approach the door, her steps quiet despite her pounding pulse. She opened it only a crack, enough to see a man standing in the dimly lit hallway, his coat damp from a mist. She recognized him immediately. Jonathan Hale, the soft-spoken painter whose studio was on the next street. They had spoken only a few times, but he always seemed kind, thoughtful, lost in his world of sketches and colors. "Clara," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder as if someone might be listening. "I need to talk to you. It's important." She allowed him inside, confused by his tense expression. Jonathan stepped carefully into the room, removing his hat and holding it against his chest. His hands trembled slightly, not from cold but from nerves. "I heard what you've been asking around about," he said softly. "The tonic, the reports, the incidents." Clara felt her stomach tighten. She didn't know he even paid attention to such matters. Jonathan took a steady breath before continuing. "I wasn't sure whether to say anything earlier. I didn't want to involve myself. But something happened last night, and now I think you're the only person I can tell." Clara sat down slowly, bracing herself. "What happened?" He hesitated again, rubbing his thumb over the edge of his hat. "My sister," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "She started taking the tonic months ago, just to calm her nerves. But the changes, Clara, the changes came so quietly. At first she was lively, cheerful, then restless. Then she stopped sleeping. She became overwhelmed by sounds no one else heard. And last night," he paused, swallowing hard. "Last night, she said someone was whispering to her through the walls. She said the voice told her not to trust anyone, not even me." Clara felt a heavy ache in her chest. She had heard similar stories, but hearing Jonathan describe it broke something open emotionally. It wasn't simply a pattern or a case study. It was a family struggling to understand something unexplainable. "She's not harmful," Jonathan added quickly, fearing Clara might misunderstand. "She's frightened. She's confused. But there's something else. Something that scared me more than anything she said." Clara leaned forward. "What was it?" "She told me the tonic doesn't work the same for everyone. She said some women hear things, some feel restless, some grow overwhelmed. She said the effects change depending on the batch." He took a shaky breath. "She said someone is testing something." Clara felt a wave of cold wash over her. That idea, testing, had crossed her mind only privately, something she hadn't dared say aloud. Now, someone else had spoken it first. Jonathan reached into his coat and placed a small vial on the table. Its liquid shimmered faintly amber under the lamp. "This was her last bottle," he whispered. "I took it before she could finish it. I think you should have it." Clara stared at it, the weight of responsibility settling onto her shoulders. A sample, a real, untouched sample, something no one else had been able to secure. But before she could speak, Clara noticed something else. Jonathan was trembling more now, not with fear, but with urgency. "I think someone knows I took it," he said quietly. "Someone was watching the house earlier. I don't know who, but I'm certain this is bigger than we thought." The lamp flickered, as if reacting to his words. Clara exhaled slowly, trying to calm the sudden storm inside her. She felt the tension rising again, the weight of secrets pressing down hard. Her mind raced with questions. Who was behind this? Why target women? What was the real purpose of the drug? But even as she thought them, she knew there were no answers yet. Only more threads pulling her into darker corners. She placed the vial gently beside her notes, knowing the moment she touched it that her investigation had changed. This wasn't just a story of strange behavior or forgotten ingredients. This was deliberate, intelligent, planned. And now she held something someone desperately wanted to hide. Outside, the wind pushed against the window, rattling the glass softly. Clara didn't move. She simply stared at the vial, understanding more clearly than ever that the danger wasn't approaching. It was already here, And someone, somewhere in London, knew exactly what she had just been given. Clara barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined footsteps coming up the stairs or shadows slipping beneath her door. She sat at her desk long after the lamp burned low, staring at the tiny vial Jonathan had left behind. It didn't look dangerous. If anything, it looked harmless, like any of the countless remedies lining the shelves of Victorian shops. But that was precisely what made it so unsettling. Something capable of shifting a woman's mind, of unsettling her thoughts and senses, shouldn't look so delicate. It shouldn't shimmer like honey under the dim light. As dawn approached, a weak gray glow crept through her window, revealing the fog that clung thickly to the city. Clara forced herself to breathe slowly, steadying her nerves. Today she needed answers, or at least leads she hadn't explored yet. Jonathan's story had added a new layer, a test, different batches, someone watching. It wasn't just alarming. It changed the entire direction of her investigation. Whoever was behind this wasn't simply careless. They were intentional, controlled, and possibly powerful. She tucked the vial safely into her coat pocket before stepping outside. The streets were quieter than usual, the fog sitting low enough to swallow the clip-clop of horse hooves and blur the outlines of passers-by. London often felt mysterious in the morning, but today it felt almost watchful. She hugged her coat tighter around herself and walked briskly toward the only place she knew might offer real insight, the laboratory where Professor Alden worked. Professor Alden was known for two things: his meticulous research on botanical compounds and his refusal to be swayed by public assumptions. Clara admired that about him. He looked at problems with clear eyes, unafraid to question what others accepted too easily. If anyone could help identify the ingredient causing the strange behavior in women, it would be him. When she arrived, she found him hunched over a table cluttered with tiny glass jars. He looked up immediately, concern crossing his lined face as if he sensed something heavy lingering around her. "You look troubled," he said gently. "Sit. Tell me what's happened." Clara didn't waste time. She explained everything: the interviews, the shifting symptoms, Dr. Merrick's hesitation, Jonathan's confession, and the vial. She watched closely as she spoke, noting how his expression hardened with each detail. When she finally placed the vial on the table between them, he stared at it for a long moment before lifting it to the light. "This isn't standard," he murmured. "Not from what I've seen. The color alone, something's different here. Can you test it?" Clara asked quietly. He set the vial down carefully, almost reverently. "I can, but it may take time." And Clara, he paused, choosing his words carefully. "Be cautious. If someone is monitoring who possesses these bottles, they may not appreciate a closer look." Clara nodded, though the knot in her stomach only tightened. "I know, but women are suffering. Families are worried. Someone needs to uncover the truth." Professor Alden offered a small, approving smile. "You've always had more courage than most. Leave it with me. I'll start immediately." Relief washed over Clara, but it was brief. Handing over the vial was one step forward, yet it also meant she had to keep digging without it. She left the laboratory feeling both grateful and uneasy. The fog had thinned now, revealing more of the busy morning movement, but Clara couldn't shake the feeling that someone had watched her the entire time. As she walked toward the marketplace, hoping to visit a few apothecaries she hadn't questioned yet, she noticed two men standing near a lamppost. They weren't dressed unusually, but there was something unsettling about how they stood. Too still, too attentive, their eyes following her even when they pretended not to. She turned onto another street, quickening her pace, heart racing. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe they were simply waiting for a carriage. But something inside her whispered otherwise. To shake the unease, Clara forced herself to focus on her next lead. There was an older apothecary on Weaver Street, known for rare herbs and unusual imports. She had been meaning to visit him for days, but rumors about his temper and secrecy had kept her away. Today, though, she needed information too badly to let hesitation stop her. The shop was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of dried plants and foreign spices. Jars lined the shelves from floor to ceiling, each labeled in cramped handwriting. The apothecary himself, Mr. Turner, looked up from behind the counter, his sharp gaze assessing her immediately. "You're the young lady asking too many questions around town," he said without preamble. Clara felt her cheeks warm, but kept her voice steady. "I'm asking because something strange is happening, and people are afraid. I only want to understand what's inside the tonic." Mr. Turner exhaled, as if debating whether speaking to her was worth the trouble. Finally, he motioned her closer. "You want answers? Then listen carefully." The original tonic was harmless. A mild sedative. Soothing. But what people are buying now, he shook his head. That's not the same formula. Something has been added. Clara's breath caught. "Do you know what?" His expression darkened. "I don't name things I can't prove. But I can tell you this, whatever it isn't from our usual suppliers. And it didn't arrive through normal channels. Someone is tampering with the product before it reaches most apothecaries." Her pulse quickened. Why would someone do that? Mr. Turner hesitated, lowering his voice. Control. The word hung heavy in the air. Clara felt a chill creep up the back of her neck. "You think someone is trying to manipulate women?" "I didn't say that," he replied carefully. "But I know what I've seen. Patterns. Deliveries, changing hands. Quiet deals made at night. And people like you, ones asking too many questions, tend to attract the wrong kind of attention." Clara swallowed hard. "Do you know who's behind it?" Mr. Turner leaned closer. "If I did, I wouldn't be speaking right now." Before Clara could respond, the bell above the door jingled sharply. A man stepped inside, his coat still wet from the street. He glanced at Clara, then at Mr. Turner, his expression unreadable. "Apologies," Mr. Turner said quickly, straightening. "We will finish this another time." Clara felt the shift instantly. The tension, the caution, the warning in his eyes. She nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. She moved toward the door, keeping her steps calm and natural, even though her heart thumped painfully against her ribs. As she stepped outside, she didn't look back. The sky had turned darker, heavy clouds rolling in despite the early hour, casting the streets in a dim, unsettling light. Clara felt the storm building inside her too. She was closer to the truth than ever before, but with every step forward, the danger grew more visible, more present. She made her way down the street, trying to process everything she had learned: different batches, tampering, secret suppliers, unknown watchers. And somewhere behind all of it, an agenda she still didn't understand. Just as she turned the corner, Clara froze. A figure stood across the street, half shrouded by fog. She couldn't make out his face, but she recognized the stance, the same stillness as the man from earlier. He wasn't pretending to be a passerby. He was watching her. Clara's breath hitched. The city around her seemed to hold still, as if waiting for her next move. Every instinct told her to run, but she forced herself to walk steadily instead, her steps quiet but quick. The figure didn't follow, but he didn't disappear either. He simply watched. Clara turned another corner, heart hammering, aware now more than ever that she was no longer just investigating a mystery. She was being pulled into it, and the closer she came to uncovering the truth, the more the shadows around her seemed to shift, as though preparing for the moment she finally stepped too far. Clara didn't stop walking until she reached a small alley behind the bookbindery, where the noise of the street faded into a muted hum. Only then did she let herself breathe, leaning against the cool brick wall as her pulse slowly steadied. She had been watched before. Journalists often attracted attention, but this was different. This felt targeted, intentional, like each step she took brought her deeper into a maze someone else had designed. She pushed herself upright, determined not to let fear dictate her next move. Still, she knew she needed help. Someone she could trust, someone who understood the city's underbelly better than she did. Only one name came to mind: Evelyn Hart. A former nurse turned quiet researcher, Evelyn had a reputation for noticing things others overlooked. She had helped Clara with previous stories, often pointing her toward inconsistencies or forgotten records. And most importantly, Evelyn didn't scare easily. Clara made her way to the small townhouse Evelyn rented, a warm, cluttered refuge filled with books and dried herbs. When Evelyn opened the door, her calm brown eyes widened slightly at Clara's appearance. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Evelyn said, pulling her inside before Clara could answer. Clara explained everything in a rush: the apothecary's warning, the men watching her, the altered formula. Evelyn listened without interruption, hands folded neatly in her lap, her quiet breaths steady and controlled. When Clara finished, Evelyn stood and paced slowly across the room. "This isn't just about a tonic anymore," Evelyn said softly. "This is organized, coordinated. And you're right, someone is watching." Clara swallowed. "Do you think it could be connected to one of the private medical societies? Some of them have influence and access to unusual ingredients." Evelyn paused mid-step, her expression shifting. "Not societies," she murmured, "but perhaps those pretending to be one." Clara frowned, confused. Evelyn crossed the room and pulled out a narrow ledger from a drawer. She flipped through the pages until she found a list of names and addresses scribbled in her tidy handwriting. "These are the shipments I've tracked for the last month," she said. "Not for the tonic specifically, but for the base ingredients used to make it. Look here, these deliveries were redirected." Clara scanned the page. "Redirected to where?" Evelyn leaned closer, her voice dropping. "A building on Ashford Lane. It's listed as a storage facility, but every nurse I know avoids that area. Something about it feels wrong." Clara felt a prickling at the back of her neck. "You think they're producing the altered batches there?" "I think," Evelyn said carefully, "that someone wants the altered batches to reach certain neighborhoods. Not all, only specific areas." That realization hit Clara with unexpected force. She thought back to the women she had met, the family she had spoken with. Most lived in the same districts, working-class areas, overlooked by officials but rich with close-knit communities. Was this deliberate? Not random contamination, but targeted distribution? Before she could dwell on it further, a loud knock rattled the front door. Evelyn stiffened. Clara grabbed her arm, urging her toward the kitchen. "Did you expect anyone?" "No," Evelyn whispered. The knocking came again, firmer this time. Clara's heart thudded painfully in her chest. They moved quietly through the kitchen and slipped out the back door into the narrow courtyard. Evelyn pulled her shawl tightly around her shoulders, glancing back just once before closing the door behind them. They hurried down the alley, their footsteps muffled by the thick air. The fog had returned, swallowing sound and shape until the city felt like a painting blurred at the edges. Clara kept glancing over her shoulder, but the alley remained empty. When they reached the main street, Evelyn stopped and pressed a hand to Clara's arm. "There's something I haven't told you," she whispered. "Because I wasn't sure." Clara turned fully toward her. "Tell me now." Evelyn hesitated before pulling a small folded note from her pocket. "This was slipped under my door 2 nights ago." She handed it to Clara. "I thought it was a harmless threat, but now I'm not so sure." Clara unfolded the note carefully. The message was short, only a single line written in rushed, uneven handwriting. "You're looking the wrong place. It isn't the tonic. It's what comes after." A cold shiver ran through Clara's body. "What does that mean?" Evelyn shook her head. "I don't know, but someone wanted me to stop digging." Clara folded the note and slipped it into her pocket, her thoughts racing. The tonic was dangerous enough, but this message implied something bigger, something beyond the altered formula, something that came next. "Evelyn," Clara said quietly, "we have to see that building on Ashford Lane. Tonight." Evelyn's face tightened with worry, but she nodded. "If we don't go now, we may lose our chance." They agreed to meet again after dusk. Clara returned home first, needing time to gather herself and plan what they might face. She lit a lamp and sat at her desk, the silence of the room pressing around her like heavy cloth. Every detail she had uncovered twisted together in her mind. Jonathan's secret tests, the apothecary's warnings, the mysterious watchers, and now the note hinting at something beyond the drug itself. She tried to map the connections, but new questions kept forming. Why target specific neighborhoods? Why change the formula subtly, not drastically? And what did what comes after mean? A reaction? A second dose? A consequence no one had seen yet? As she stared at the paper, A low rumble of thunder echoed through the city. Rain began tapping against the window, soft at first, then steadily heavier. Clara looked out into the storm-darkened street, feeling a strange mix of fear and determination rise in her chest. This no longer felt like a simple historical curiosity, the kind of boring history for sleep story she often researched. This felt alive, dangerous, and if she didn't push forward, no one else would. She blew out the lamp and slipped her notebook into her satchel. The rain drummed harder against the pavement as she stepped outside, making the city feel even more shadowed and uncertain. When she reached the meeting point near Ashford Lane, Evelyn was already there, her shawl soaked from the rain, but her expression steady. Together, they walked toward the building, a tall, windowless structure that stood strangely isolated despite being surrounded by homes. It looked abandoned, but Clara knew better. The faint glow beneath the door suggested activity inside. Quiet, controlled, and secretive. Clara and Evelyn exchanged a tense glance. But before they could take another step, a carriage turned the corner, its lanterns cutting through the rain, and it stopped directly in front of the building. A man stepped out. Clara froze. She recognized him, not from the streets, not from the apothecaries, but from her past. Someone she thought she'd never see involved in something like this. Someone who wasn't supposed to be here at all. And as he lifted his coat collar and disappeared into the building, Clara felt the ground shift beneath her. A second plot twist, unexpected and terrifying, crashed into her mind. This wasn't just about the tonic. This was personal, and it was far bigger than anything she had imagined. Clara's heart raced as she pressed herself against the wall of the narrow street, her eyes fixed on the silhouette of the man disappearing into the building on Ashford Lane. She couldn't believe it. Someone from her past, someone she had never expected to cross paths with again, now connected to the very mystery she had been chasing for weeks. Evelyn's hand on her arm broke through the shock, grounding her. "We can't hesitate," Evelyn whispered, her voice steady despite the rain drumming down on them. "If he's inside, we need to know what's happening before it's too late." Clara nodded, swallowing the lump of fear in her throat. The building loomed over them, dark and imposing, with only the faint glow of a lamp sliding beneath the door. Every instinct screamed that they were walking into danger, but the unanswered questions, the women affected, the altered tonic, the shadowy watchers, pushed her forward. They approached the door cautiously. Clara's hand brushed against the cold metal handle, and she froze. Evelyn leaned close. "There's a latch on the side," she murmured. "We can slip it open quietly. But once we're inside, we have to move slowly." Taking a deep breath, Clara followed Evelyn as the door creaked open just enough to allow them in. The smell hit her immediately, a mix of damp wood, chemicals, and something sharper she couldn't identify. It was a smell that spoke of secrecy, of experiments conducted behind locked doors, far from prying eyes. The interior was dimly lit, shadows crawling across the walls like living things. Clara's eyes adjusted, revealing stacks of crates and barrels, each marked with strange symbols and numbers. Some jars glowed faintly under the lanterns, while others were dark and opaque. She felt a wave of unease. This wasn't just storage. It was a laboratory, a place where the altered tonic was being produced and likely tested. They moved deeper into the building, keeping close to the walls. Clara's ears picked up faint murmurs ahead. She strained to hear, heart pounding. "Must keep the batches consistent," a voice said. "Harsh, clipped. We cannot risk exposure. Any deviation, and the experiment fails." Clara froze. The word experiment cut through her like a blade. Her mind raced. They weren't just selling the tonic. Someone was testing it, refining it, and controlling its effects intentionally. Every sudden burst of hysteria, every restless night, every strange reaction was part of a larger plan. Evelyn leaned closer. "Do you hear that? They're talking about batches, experiments." Clara nodded silently, her pulse quickening. Every step they took further into the building deepened the tension, like walking along the edge of a cliff. They rounded a corner and came face to face with a row of glass tanks, each containing a small, amber-colored liquid. On a table nearby, notebooks were scattered, covered in careful handwriting and numbers, formulas and notes that made Clara's head spin. She reached out to pick up one of the books, but Evelyn grabbed her wrist gently. "Don't touch anything," she warned. "We need to observe first, not alert them." Clara exhaled quietly, resisting the urge. The voice she had heard earlier came again, this time closer, more urgent. "Must keep the women in controlled areas. We can't let word spread beyond the city blocks. If any deviations occur, we intervene immediately. It's imperative." Clara felt a chill crawl down her spine. Controlled areas, deviations, intervention. This was beyond manipulation. This was orchestrated domination, and women across the city were pawns in a deliberate game. She whispered to Evelyn, "We need to find records. Something that tells us who's running this, who's ordering these experiments." Evelyn nodded, and they moved silently between crates, searching. Behind a stack of barrels, Clara found a small door partially concealed by shadows. She nudged it gently, revealing a narrow stairway leading downward. A faint light spilled up from the steps below. "This might be where they keep the main records," Evelyn said, her voice barely audible. "If we're going to understand this, we have to see it." Clara felt her stomach tighten, but she followed, descending into the dimly lit basement. The walls were lined with shelves, filled with stacks of papers, bottles, and vials. The air smelled stronger here, sharper, and every step echoed as though the building itself was listening. They moved quickly, scanning the room. Clara's eyes landed on a ledger bound in black leather. Its pages were filled with careful notes, shipment details, and addresses. Some were familiar, the neighborhood she had already visited, but others were unfamiliar, pointing to areas she hadn't yet connected to the tonic. "This is it," Clara whispered. "This must be the central record." Evelyn nodded, already flipping through pages. "Look at this. The batches are labeled with numbers, dates, even personal details. Names of women who received specific bottles. They're tracking responses." Clara's hands trembled as she realized the magnitude of what she was seeing. This wasn't just a drug being sold for profit. It was a controlled experiment on a population, meticulously recorded and monitored for results. Whoever was behind this had a level of planning and resources that made her earlier fears seem small by comparison. Suddenly, a creak above them made both women freeze. Footsteps, light but deliberate, crossed the floor. Clara's pulse spiked. "They're coming," she whispered, her voice tight. Evelyn grabbed her arm. "We need to hide. Quickly." They slipped behind a large barrel, hearts hammering in their chests. The footsteps grew closer, stopping just above the stairway. A shadow fell across the basement floor as the man they had seen earlier, Clara's past acquaintance, descended the steps. He paused, glancing around, then reached for a desk drawer, pulling out a small notebook. He flipped through it, muttering numbers and names under his breath. Clara caught a glimpse of his expression, focused, calculating, and entirely indifferent to the women whose lives were being altered. Then he spoke into a small device clipped to his coat. "Batch 14 is ready for distribution. Ensure the women in Whitechapel and surrounding districts receive it by morning. No exceptions." Clara felt her stomach drop. Batch 14. That meant more women were already being affected, or about to be. She whispered to Evelyn, "We have to get this ledger and get out. Now." Evelyn nodded, carefully lifting the black-bound book. They slipped it into Clara's satchel, keeping low behind the barrel. But just as they started toward the stairs, a sharp click echoed through the basement. Clara's blood ran cold, the sound of a lock disengaging. The man turned abruptly, his eyes scanning the shadows. "I know someone's here," he said, his voice low but dangerous. Clara and Evelyn froze, pressed against the barrels, knowing that one wrong move could mean discovery. The tension in the room was unbearable. Every breath, every heartbeat seemed magnified. Clara could feel the presence of danger pressing down, heavier than the damp air in the basement. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the man paused. He moved toward the stairway, disappearing from view, muttering something about a delivery schedule. Clara exhaled slowly, but her relief was tempered by fear. "This isn't over," she whispered. "Not by a long shot." Evelyn nodded grimly. "We've seen too much, and now we have proof." Clara's mind raced as they climbed the stairs, returning to the alley outside. Rain had soaked the streets, and the fog had thickened even more, curling around lamplight like smoke. The ledger in her satchel felt heavier than it was, full of secrets, evidence, and danger waiting to strike if it fell into the wrong hands. As they hurried back toward the safety of Evelyn's townhouse, Clara realized something terrifying. This building was only one node in a network, a hub for a far-reaching operation that affected hundreds of women, possibly more. Batch 14 was just the beginning, and whoever orchestrated this knew exactly what they were doing. Somewhere in the shadows of London, the person behind this watched. They had anticipated intrusions, threats, and curiosity, and they would not stop. Clara and Evelyn didn't speak until they were inside, doors closed and locked. Only then did the weight of what they had witnessed settle fully. "This is far bigger than we imagined," Evelyn said quietly, flipping open the ledger. "And if we're going to stop it, we'll have to uncover every connection, every shipment, every person involved." Clara swallowed hard, staring at the rain streaming down the windows. "And we're running out of time. Batch 14. That means more women will be affected tonight, tomorrow. If we don't act quickly, there may be no way to contain it." Evelyn looked up, eyes dark with determination. "Then we keep going. We follow the trail, no matter how dangerous it gets." Clara nodded, though unease churned in her stomach. She knew this investigation had escalated beyond anything she had expected. What started as a story of a strange tonic affecting Victorian women had become a battle against an unseen, calculated force, one with resources, secrecy, and a chilling willingness to manipulate human minds. And as the storm outside pounded against the windows, Clara realized that they were now racing against time, against a system designed to stay hidden, against a force that was always one step ahead. The night had grown darker, the rain heavier, and London's fog thicker. Somewhere out there, the next batch was being prepared. The next woman was about to be affected, and Clara knew they were about to step even deeper into the heart of the mystery, where the stakes were higher than ever and the danger more immediate than they could have imagined. Clara spent the next few hours poring over the ledger in Evelyn's dimly lit sitting room, the rain still drumming against the windows. Each page revealed more than the last: shipments, recipients, notes about dosage adjustments, and even subtle annotations about how certain women reacted. It was painstaking work, but Clara knew that every detail might be a clue to understanding who, or what, was orchestrating this deliberate manipulation. "What's this?" Clara murmured, tracing a line of writing with her finger. Some of the entries weren't just about where the tonic went. They included observations about the women themselves. Notes like increased agitation after 2 doses, sleep patterns disrupted, or responds well to extended dosage suggested someone was monitoring the results very closely. This wasn't a random distribution of a faulty product. This was a study, a systematic experiment on human behavior. Evelyn leaned over her shoulder, frowning. It's as though someone is trying to measure something, some variable in women's responses. Why? That's the question. Clara tapped the ledger thoughtfully. It's not just to see what happens. It's to control outcomes. They want predictable reactions, restlessness, hysteria, agitation, but in a way they can manage. Her mind raced through every story she had heard, every woman she had met, every subtle symptom that had seemed insignificant. That explains why the batches differ. They're testing different combinations to see which creates the most manageable chaos. Evelyn shivered, glancing at the window. Manageable chaos, that's a terrifying thought. Clara closed her eyes briefly. She needed to think, to connect the dots. Each entry in the ledger was a thread, and if they followed it carefully, they might find the source. But the more she realized, the more she understood the danger. Whoever was behind this was meticulous, calculating, and clearly had no concern for the well-being of the women they experimented on. A sudden knock on the front door made both women jump. Clara moved toward the door cautiously, signaling Evelyn to stay back. "Who is it?" Evelyn called softly. "Miss Clara," a familiar voice said from the other side. It was Jonathan. "I had to come. I think someone followed me here." Clara opened the door just enough to let him in. He was soaked from the rain, his coat plastered to his frame, eyes wide with anxiety. "They know you've been investigating," he said, speaking in rushed, low tones. "The men at the apothecaries, they're not just watchers. They're enforcers. They're protecting someone higher up. And now they're looking for the ledger." Clara's stomach tightened. So this isn't just about the tonic in the streets anymore. They want to hide the evidence. Jonathan nodded grimly. "Exactly. And I think they'll do anything to get it back." Evelyn closed the front door behind them and leaned against it. "We need to act carefully. Whoever is behind this knows exactly what we're capable of discovering, and they'll anticipate our moves." Clara's mind raced. She looked at the ledger, then back at Jonathan and Evelyn. "We have to trace the shipments," she said firmly. "We have to find the source of these altered batches. And if there's anyone in London controlling this, we need to know who." Jonathan ran a hand through his wet hair. "I can help. I know some of the people who might have access to the distribution routes. I've seen them moving things at night, subtle deliveries that nobody notices." Clara nodded. "Good. But we have to be careful. Every step we take is being watched, and every person we approach could be part of the operation." The three of them sat in tense silence for a moment, listening to the rain. Clara realized something crucial. This investigation was no longer just a story. It had become a race against time, a confrontation with a hidden force that had been quietly shaping events in London for weeks, if not months. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the street outside. Clara jumped, heart hammering. Evelyn and Jonathan looked toward the window. "What now?" Jonathan muttered, moving to peek outside. Clara followed, seeing only the empty, rain-slicked street. But a sense of dread settled over her. Someone was sending a message. They were watching, they were capable, and they wouldn't hesitate to act. "We can't stay here," Evelyn said quietly. "Not with the ledger. If they know we have it." Clara nodded. "We need to move it. Hide it somewhere safe, somewhere they won't think to look." They packed the ledger carefully into a waterproof bag, ensuring every corner was secured. Clara took a deep breath, trying to steady the racing of her heart. Each step they took from that point forward would be crucial, and every decision carried risk. As they prepared to leave, Clara felt a new layer of unease settle in. There had been something she had overlooked, small but significant. The entries in the ledger weren't just about doses and responses. Some had dates that didn't match shipments, locations that weren't mentioned elsewhere, and initials that didn't correspond to any apothecary or supplier she knew. "This isn't just an experiment in one part of the city," she murmured, tracing a line of writing with her finger. "This is happening across multiple districts. Someone is coordinating it, keeping track of women in detail. This goes higher than anyone we've encountered so far." Evelyn leaned in, her voice barely a whisper. "And the initials? Could they be names or codes?" Clara frowned. "Codes. Definitely codes. Whoever is orchestrating this is hiding identities, using ciphers so no outsider can trace them." Jonathan's eyes darkened. "Which means whoever is behind this doesn't just have power. They have influence. People in positions to protect the operation, to keep it hidden from the authorities." Clara's pulse quickened. "Then the stakes are higher than we imagined. This isn't just about altered tonic. This is about a system, a network, a calculated manipulation. And if we don't stop it, more women will be affected, and no one will even know why." Evelyn glanced at her, worry etched on her face. "Do you think we can stop it?" Clara looked at the ledger, the records, the coded notes. "We have to try," she said firmly. "We've already uncovered too much to turn back. And the moment we hesitate, the operation continues." As they moved through the darkened streets toward a safe location Clara had in mind, the fog thickened, curling around lamplight like smoke. Each shadow seemed alive, each alley a potential threat. Clara felt eyes on them, even when she couldn't see anyone. Then, as they rounded a corner, a new development struck. A carriage stopped abruptly in front of them, lanterns cutting through the fog. The driver said nothing, only tipping his head slightly. A figure stepped down, familiar yet impossible. It was Dr. Merrick. Clara's stomach dropped. He had always seemed cautious, even hesitant, but now his appearance in the rain-soaked street felt deliberate. His eyes scanned them quickly, landing on the ledger. "You have something you shouldn't," he said quietly, his voice tense but controlled. "And if you want to survive this investigation, you'll follow me." Now, Clara glanced at Evelyn and Jonathan. The tension was unbearable. Merrick's presence changed everything. If he was involved, directly or indirectly, the web of secrecy was deeper than they could have imagined. Jonathan whispered urgently, "Do we trust him?" Clara shook her head, but the answer wasn't simple. Merrick could be an ally, or he could be a trap. Either way, he knew about the ledger, and he had moved to intercept them. Evelyn's hand tightened on Clara's arm. "Whatever we do, we have to stay smart. One wrong move, and all this, the ledger, our investigation, could be lost." Clara took a deep breath, feeling the ledger weigh heavily in her satchel. The rain continued to fall, the fog pressing in, the streets empty and silent except for their footsteps. Somewhere in London, the network continued its operations, each batch distributed, each reaction recorded. And now, with Dr. Merrick in the rain-soaked street before them, the investigation had escalated. What had begun as a strange story of Victorian women and a mysterious tonic was becoming a confrontation with something far larger, far more calculated, and far more dangerous than Clara had ever imagined. Every step forward carried risk. Every choice mattered, and the shadows around them seemed to pulse with anticipation, as if the city itself were holding its breath, waiting for the next move. Clara knew one thing for certain. The next moments would change everything, and there was no turning back. The investigation had entered a new, perilous phase, and London, cloaked in fog and rain, had become a labyrinth of secrets, danger, and unforeseen revelations. The storm outside wasn't the only thing gathering intensity. The real tempest was waiting just beyond the door, ready to strike. And Clara, Evelyn, and Jonathan were walking straight into it. Clara, Evelyn, and Jonathan followed Dr. Merrick through the twisting streets, the rain soaking their coats and the fog curling around their feet. Every step was measured, every glance over their shoulders filled with tension. Merrick's pace was steady, confident, but Clara couldn't shake the feeling that each turn brought them closer to danger, not safety. She clutched the ledger tightly. The pages drenched slightly from the rain, but the information it contained felt more valuable and more dangerous than ever. Finally, they arrived at an unassuming townhouse tucked into a quiet lane. Merrick unlocked the door with a key he had pulled from his coat, gesturing for them to enter. Inside, the warmth of the room was almost jarring compared to the chill outside, but Clara barely noticed. Her attention was fixed on the walls lined with maps, charts, and pin notes, each marking districts where the tonic had been distributed, women affected, and responses carefully tracked. "This is it," Merrick said quietly, his voice tense but controlled. "This is where everything is coordinated. Whoever is behind this has been observing, calculating, and controlling every move for months. And now," he paused, his gaze sharp, "we can finally stop it." Clara's pulse quickened. "How?" "We have the ledger, but there are still so many moving parts. The distribution, the watchers, the batches." Merrick pointed to a network of lines on the wall. "We target the source of the shipments and alert authorities discreetly. We can shut down the operations without causing panic, without alerting the orchestrators that we know." Evelyn leaned in, examining the charts. "If we move carefully, we can intercept the final batch, batch 14, and prevent further harm tonight." Clara nodded, feeling a surge of determination. They had worked tirelessly, and now the pieces were finally aligning. But as they coordinated their next steps, a sudden movement caught Clara's eye, a shadow shifting near the corner of the room. Before she could react, the figure stepped forward, and the gaslight illuminated a familiar face. It was Jonathan's sister, Marianne. "Marianne," Clara whispered, disbelief etched across her face. What are you doing here? Marianne's expression was unreadable, a mixture of resolve and something darker Clara couldn't place. I had to see for myself, she said quietly. I knew something was happening with the tonic, but I couldn't involve anyone, not until I understood it. Clara's mind reeled. The ledger, the distribution network, the orchestration of chaos. It all suddenly gained another layer of complexity. Marianne had been closer to the operation than anyone realized, observing it from within the city's undercurrents. Before Clara could question her further, Merrick spoke. We don't have much time. The final delivery is leaving soon. If we act carefully, we can prevent it and expose the network. Together, the four of them moved with urgency, stepping into the shadows outside the townhouse. The streets were slick with rain, but Clara's focus was laser-sharp. Every alley, every corner could hide a watcher, an enforcer, or someone desperate to protect the operation. They reached the location marked for Batch 14, a small warehouse on the edge of the district. Clara's heart pounded as they approached. The glow of lanterns inside revealed crates stacked high, men moving quickly, almost rehearsed in their motions. It was clear the orchestrators had anticipated efficiency, but they had not anticipated Clara and her team. Merrick motioned for them to split. Clara and Evelyn slipped in from one side, while Jonathan and Marianne approached another entrance. The tension was unbearable, each second stretching like hours. Clara's hands trembled slightly as she clutched the ledger, but she knew every careful step mattered. Inside, they witnessed the chaos orchestrated by the orchestrators, crates labeled with batch numbers, vials prepared for delivery, and notes detailing recipients. Clara could see the women affected in her mind's eye. The restlessness, agitation, and confusion. She felt a surge of anger and determination. Evelyn whispered, "We need to secure the crates and call authorities." Quietly, without alerting the men here. Clara nodded. They moved quickly, slipping ropes around the crates, marking their locations and noting the key details. Just as they finished, a sharp shout rang out. One of the men had spotted them. Chaos erupted. Crates toppled, lanterns swung dangerously, and men began shouting orders. Clara's heart pounded as they ducked behind stacks of barrels, Evelyn gripping her arm. "Move!" Merrick shouted. "The ledger. We're leaving now." They dashed through the warehouse, narrowly avoiding capture, and spilled into the alley outside. The authorities they had prearranged were already there, alerted by discreet signals from Merrick. Officers moved swiftly, surrounding the warehouse, securing evidence, and detaining the men inside. Clara exhaled heavily, rain streaming down her face. For the first time in weeks, a sense of relief washed over her. The network had been dismantled, Batch 14 intercepted, and the women across London would no longer be subjected to the orchestrated chaos. But before she could fully process the victory, Marianne stepped forward, holding out a small envelope. "There's more," she said quietly. This was hidden in the ledger, a message they didn't want anyone to see. Clara opened the envelope, her pulse quickening. Inside was a single sheet of paper, neatly folded. The message was simple, yet chilling. "You've uncovered this layer, but there are others. The network extends beyond London. We are everywhere." Clara felt a chill crawl up her spine. Even in victory, the shadows remained. The orchestrators had been stopped tonight, but the warning was clear. This was only one part of a larger scheme, one that might reach far beyond what they had imagined. Evelyn placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. "We've done what we could here, but we have to stay vigilant. This isn't over." Clara nodded, closing her eyes briefly. The streets of London were quiet now, the rain beginning to ease. They had resolved the immediate threat, but the ledger, the network, and the message reminded her that the battle against manipulation and control was far from finished. As they walked back through the foggy streets, Clara felt a mix of exhaustion and resolve. They had faced danger, uncovered secrets, and stopped the immediate threat to countless women. But the final twist, the knowledge that the network's reach was far greater than they had realized, hung over her like a storm cloud. Somewhere out there, the orchestrators were watching, planning, waiting. And Clara knew that while tonight had been a victory, Tomorrow could bring new challenges, new dangers, and new revelations that would test them in ways they could not yet imagine. She clutched the ledger tightly, rain dripping from her hair, and whispered to herself, "We've stopped this for now. But the story, it's not finished." And with that thought, the fog swallowed the streets behind them, leaving the city silent, but charged with the knowledge that the real danger and the true depth of the mystery still lay hidden in the shadows, waiting for the next move. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time Clara, Evelyn, Jonathan, and Marianne made their way back through the fog-laden streets of London. The city, which had seemed so menacing and shrouded in secrets just hours before, now felt quieter, almost as if it were exhaling after a long-held breath. Clara's mind, however, was still racing. The ledger, heavy in her satchel, contained evidence not just of the altered tonic but of the meticulous planning behind it. The routes, the coded names, and the careful observation of women's reactions. It was proof of an orchestrated effort that had remained hidden for months, and now it was safe in their possession. Evelyn walked beside her, her shawl damp but her eyes sharp and alert. "The authorities will handle the men in the warehouse. They have the evidence, and the operations there are over," she said, her voice calm but tinged with relief. "But the message Marianne found, that's troubling." Clara nodded, feeling the weight of it. The envelope's simple warning, "The network extends beyond London," was a reminder that their victory, though significant, was only one part of a larger picture. "We stopped batch 14, she said quietly. "We prevented more women from being affected tonight. That's real. That's tangible. But yes, there may be other operations, other batches, perhaps even in other cities." Jonathan, walking slightly ahead, glanced back. "We knew this wouldn't be easy, but I didn't expect it to reach this far," he admitted. "I've seen the letters, the shipments, the coded logs. It's bigger than I imagined, but we've disrupted it here. That counts." Claire smiled faintly. "It counts more than you realize. This ledger, these charts, they'll help the authorities trace the operations, dismantle the network further. We've given them the tools to prevent more harm." Marianne, who had been unusually quiet since revealing the envelope, spoke for the first time. "I wanted to stop it from within," she said, her voice low but steady. "I followed the shipments, kept records, watched patterns. I never thought it would come to this, being out in the streets, risking everything. But I see now that we couldn't have done it from the shadows. Action had to be taken." Clara nodded, understanding her entirely. The story had begun as a curiosity, a strange piece of history she wanted to unravel, but had become deeply personal and incredibly urgent. Women across London had been unknowingly affected, their lives subtly altered, their behaviors studied and manipulated. What they had stopped tonight was a cruel experiment, but more importantly, they had prevented immediate harm and brought the truth to light. They reached Evelyn's townhouse, the familiar glow of the gas lamps casting warm light on the damp cobblestones. Inside, Clara laid the ledger carefully on the table, her hands brushing over the worn leather cover. Every detail within its pages represented a step toward justice, a step toward understanding the magnitude of what had been orchestrated. Evelyn poured tea, the comforting steam rising in the room. "We'll hand this over to the authorities tomorrow. The operation in London will be disrupted entirely, and the records will help trace the network's reach further." Clara took a sip, letting the warmth seep into her hands. She felt a sense of relief she hadn't known she could feel in weeks, but it was tempered by lingering unease. The network might extend beyond London, but tonight they had stopped the immediate threat. That was enough to give them hope. Jonathan leaned back, letting out a deep breath. "I think the biggest victory tonight isn't just stopping the tonic deliveries," he said. "It's uncovering the planning, the observation, the intent. We've exposed it, and that exposure alone will prevent further manipulation." Claire nodded, considering his words. The ledger had been proof, but their presence in the streets, their observation, their willingness to act, that had mattered too. This was a human story at its core. The women affected, the watchers, the orchestrators, and now, the people brave enough to intervene. Marianne, still holding the envelope, looked at Clara. "The warning in here, "It's unsettling," she said. "Do you think it means there are others actively continuing this somewhere else?" Clara paused, reflecting. "Possibly. But what matters is that we've taken action where we could, and we've created a record. That knowledge is power. The network may exist elsewhere, but anyone attempting to manipulate like this now has to contend with exposure, investigation, and accountability." Evelyn added softly, "Sometimes the smallest acts, the courage to observe, to question, to record, make the biggest difference. We've done that, and it matters more than we might even realize." Clara's gaze lingered on the ledger. It was more than just a document. It was a testament to the consequences of unchecked experimentation, of secrecy, and of manipulation. But it was also proof of human resilience, of bravery, and of determination to confront injustice. The storm outside had passed completely now, leaving the streets glistening under the soft glow of gas lamps. Clara felt the tension slowly easing from her shoulders. The city, which had seemed so dark and menacing, now felt quieter, almost protective in a strange way. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and danger, but they had emerged with a story, with evidence, and with hope. As the group sat quietly, sharing tea in the silence of a city finally at rest, Clara reflected on the journey. The tonic had been dangerous, yes, but the deeper threat had been the hidden network, the calculated manipulation of human behavior. They had confronted it, and while the full scope might never be entirely known, they had stopped the immediate harm. That was something to hold on to. Marian finally spoke again, her voice lighter. "We've done what we could, and now, the rest is in the hands of those who can act on the evidence. We've given them the chance to make real change." Clara smiled, feeling a warmth that had little to do with the tea and more to do with the sense of accomplishment. "Exactly. And we've learned something else along the way, about vigilance, about courage, and about the importance of noticing what others overlook." Jonathan leaned back, a faint grin forming despite the exhaustion. "And perhaps about the danger of Victorian tonics," he added with a small laugh, breaking the tension that had lingered for weeks. Evelyn chuckled softly. "Let's not romanticize it too much. Some stories are worth the quiet reflection rather than amusement." Clara nodded, though a small smile tugged at her lips. She felt a sense of closure, of having tied together the threads of a story that had been hidden in shadow for too long. The women affected by the tonic, the orchestrators, the network, they had faced exposure and accountability. The ledger would guide authorities, historians, and future investigators. The immediate danger had been resolved. But just as Clara leaned back, feeling a sense of calm, Marianne pulled one last note from the envelope she had kept close. It was small, handwritten, and partially folded. Clara unfolded it and read aloud. "Knowledge is power, but curiosity can be dangerous. Not everything ends here." The words left a shiver in the room, a reminder that even the most thorough investigation could not guarantee the end of every secret. The network in London had been disrupted, but curiosity, human nature, and hidden ambitions meant that new mysteries might always arise. Clara looked around at her companions, Evelyn, Jonathan, Marianne, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. They had faced fear together, uncovered truths, and prevented immediate harm. And while the world was not entirely safe, they had proven that courage, observation, and action could make a difference. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, Clara closed the ledger, placing it carefully on the table. The rain-soaked streets outside reflected the new day, and for the first time in weeks, she felt the quiet satisfaction of a story completed, a danger averted, and the knowledge that they had done everything they could. The women of London would no longer be subject to the manipulations of the tonic, at least for now. And though the final note hinted at future challenges, Clara knew they had left their mark. They had faced the shadows, uncovered secrets, and brought truth to light. The city was waking, the fog lifting, and the streets glimmered with the quiet reassurance of safety restored. Clara, Evelyn, Jonathan, and Marianne sat together in the calm aftermath, reflecting on the journey and the lessons learned. Curiosity and courage, vigilance and action. These were the tools that had carried them through the danger. And as Clara gazed out the window at the slowly brightening streets of London, she realized that history, even when dark and manipulative, could be illuminated by those willing to seek the truth. The ledger remained on the table, a testament to the shadows uncovered and the lives protected. And while mysteries would always remain, and networks might exist beyond their knowledge, the story had reached its conclusion here, in this quiet room, with the rain finally stopped and the city ready to begin a new day. Clara leaned back, breathing deeply. The city, the tonic, the women, the danger, they were all part of a chapter that had been written, explored, and resolved. The danger was gone, the conflict settled, and the lessons clear. Vigilance matters, curiosity matters, and courage matters most of all. And with that, the story ended, not in chaos, not in fear, but in reflection, understanding, and the quiet power of uncovering the truth.